state authorities wanted to do an autopsy, which is state law in the state of Texas, and the federal people wanted to take it back to Washington, D.C. And there was a lot of pushing, shoving, cursing. We would try to roll the casket out, someone would grab it and try to roll it back towards the trauma room. This went on for quite a while. It was push and shove type thing. Quite a bit of, like I say, obscene language. I had to hold on to the cross on the casket because of the friction that, where people's pulling it back and forwards. And I was scared to death. I was really frightened.
I believe that if Dr. Rose had been allowed to perform the examination here, since his qualifications were impeccable, that much of the early confusion surrounding the wounds and the questions as to the direction and number of shots could have been settled quickly under the capable forensic studies which Dr. Rose would undoubtedly have performed. But we didn't have the opportunity to examine President Kennedy here.
At Parkland Hospital, the Secret Service had won the battle for the president's body. With unseemly haste, they illegally removed it from Dallas and flew it back to Andrews Air Force Base in Washington. The new president had been sworn in on the plane and now made his first address to the nation.
I know that the world shares the sorrow that Mrs. Kennedy and her family bear.
But as Kennedy's coffin was unloaded into a hearse in full public view, it seems his body was surreptitiously being removed from the far side of Air Force One and taken away by helicopter.
I ask for your help and God.
Its most likely destination was Walter Reed Army Hospital for a covert examination of the president's wounds and the removal of his brain. This prevented a proper investigation of the fatal headshot at the official autopsy. Only a 5-minute flight from Walter Reed, the helicopter pad at Bethesda Naval Hospital, where the autopsy team awaited the arrival of Kennedy's body. Medical technician Paul O'Connor was there.
I remember it being about 8 o'clock in the evening that we heard helicopters. I heard helicopters. And it sounded to me like there were 2 helicopters. Couldn't tell where they were coming from or where they went, but it sounded like they were landing. A few minutes later, the door burst open in the back of the hospital, and in came 6 or 8 men carrying a casket.
America's finest forensic pathologists were not appointed to perform the autopsy of the century. Instead, naval career men with meager experience of such work were chosen. As forensic pathologist, Dr. Cyril Wecht explains.
Humes and Boswell were in charge of hospital pathology at Bethesda, just like hospital pathologists in civilian life. They had had no formal training or experience or practice in forensic pathology. It was incredible that Humes and Boswell should have been selected to perform this autopsy.
Actually, these 2 doctors, Dr. Boswell and Dr. Humes, became commanding officers of a particular school, which was the school that I was attending. And their jobs in those days was more administrative than it was actually laying the hands on to people to do autopsies and such. I'd never seen them do autopsies all the time that I was there. I never even saw them ever come in the morgue.
There were, we know, about 33 people officially logged in the autopsy room that night. We know that there was an admiral, there was a general, there were FBI and Secret Service people. And these people, Humes and Boswell, were career military people, just a couple of years shy of retirement. They were not about to stand up and say to their superior officers, we're going to do it our way. No way would they say that.
There were kind of mysterious civilian people in civilian clothes were there. It seemed like they commanded a lot of respect and attention. Sinister-looking people. That they would come up and look over my shoulder, or look over Dr. Boswell's shoulder, and run back, and they'd have a little conference in the corner. And then all at once there's nowhere comes down and says, stop what you're doing and go to the other procedure. And that's the way it was all night. And we just jumped back and forth, back and forth. There was no smooth flow of the procedure at all.
So we see that Humes and Boswell were indeed controlled, And we know from their own records that they, Humes and Boswell, were not professionally competent and expert in the realm of forensic pathology. And that's how you got a botched, horribly inadequate, inept, inadequate, superficial medical legal autopsy in the case of John F. Kennedy.
But manipulation of the evidence did not end with the legal autopsy. The National Archives in Washington received a metal tray containing all the vital medical materials relating to the case, including the president's brain. An inventory check 3 years after the assassination revealed that these items had vanished.
In that inventory of October 30th, 1966, that metal tray containing the brain and the Kodachromes and the microscopic autopsy tissue slides are no longer listed. So somewhere between April of 65 and the end of October 66, these things were literally taken illegally, stolen, removed from the National Archives. And to this day, as we sit and talk, nobody in the United States government has ever accounted for these missing items. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what this would mean in a routine murder case? I can tell you, as a forensic pathologist testifying in a courtroom, if I came in a murder that not many people cared about, and the other side was asking, where is the brain, and did you examine it, and what did you find, and so on, and I said, well, I chose not to examine it. Where is it? Can you examine it today, or our experts want to examine it? Well, I don't have it any longer. It was discarded, or so on. You know what would happen to that case, probably? The judge would throw it out of the courtroom. But in this case, the government hasn't been concerned, and my colleagues in forensic pathology were not concerned. And yet there's not one of them would ever tolerate that kind of aberrant, unacceptable, unethical, immoral, and illegal procedure or policy in his own office. Not one of them. But in this case, it just rolls off their back, along with the acceptance of the single bullet theory and all the other things.